What's going on? Welcome back to the vlog. This is day number 8 in Texas. We made a total profit of $1,812 in our first week in Texas. We got 2 more weeks, and let me tell you, the trip just got crazier and crazier. Let's hop into the 1-2 streets at Poker House. Let's get it, baby. Back in the streets of Poker House, Dallas. I told myself I was going to take a break today and not play poker, get some rest, but 5 o'clock rolled around, I blacked out, and I just ended up back here. I don't know what happened, but me and my buddy Joey are ready to grind. He's already ripping an online tourney. What a beast. We're going to hop straight into the action. Our usual 1-2 game for $500. In my opinion, this is my best vlog yet. You guys are going to enjoy the hands in this one, and we go right into the thick of it. Pocket aces first hand. There's 1 limper over to me. We have the best hand ever created. You know what that means? We are going to raise. I make it $25 and get a call from the hijack and the button player. So we're 3 ways to a flop out of position, which is queen, 6, 5, rainbow. Don't want to give any free cards to our opponent, so we bet $30 and we get a call from the button. So we're going heads up here to a turn, which is the 8 of spades. It definitely connects the board a little bit more, and it brings in a flush draw. Pocket aces are still a very good hand. We're definitely going to be betting more, so I make it $100. The button hems and haws before deciding to fold his cards. We're going to scoop in the first pot of the night, feeling good. Let's keep the ball rolling. Ace-3 of clubs here. There's 1 limp. The hijack makes it $15 to me. I'm in the cutoff, and I can mix in a 3-bet here every once in a while, so that's what I do. I make it $45 to go, but we don't even get through 1 player. The button decides to cold call my 3-bet. So the hijack comes along as well. We're going 3 ways to a flop in between 2 opponents. The flop comes king 5-3 with 2 hearts. When the hijack checks to me, I decide to bet this board, but looking back at it, I think I just need to give up when I get called in 2 spots. The button's going to have a decently strong range, and there's not a lot of hands that are going to want to fold on this board, but I still decide to take a stab at this pot. I make it $40. The button decides to also put in $40, and so does the hijack. So we're still going 3 ways to a turn, and I think that now it's just time for us to give up, especially when the turn comes the 6 of hearts. Brings in the front door flush draw. We're just going to check fold here. When the hijack checks to me, like I mentioned, we're going to be checking, which is what I do, but we get to see a free river card when the button checks back. The river is the 9 of hearts. Any heart will have a flush, so when the hijack checks to me, I decide to take a little stab at this pot. The reason being, it's likely our opponents could have just 1 pair with no heart, and they're not going to call a bet here. We don't even need to bet that big. If they have a hand like pocket 10s or pocket 8s with no heart, or just like king, queen, king, jack, no heart, they're not going to call here. But the reason I don't like this play is because it's multi-way. We're basically just guessing and hoping our opponent doesn't have a heart, and that's not the way I like to play poker, so I really don't like the way I played this hand. Regardless, I did bet out for $75, and the button thought about it for a little while before calling. The hijack folded, and the button's going to show us the good old ace king of hearts. He turned the ace high flush, and I guess he just called the river to try and induce the hijack to call. I'm not sure why he didn't raise on the river there, but we're going to forget about this hand, move on. Like I mentioned, I didn't love the way I played it, but that's okay because the best way to learn is by making mistakes. I look down at pocket 6s here. We're in the low jack and there's 2 limps to me. I raise it up to $30. A lot of people argue about over limping here with low pocket pairs, and I think it's a fine play sometimes, but I'm a player that likes to take the aggressive route. I think it makes our post-flop game a lot easier. Just because we don't hit a 6 doesn't mean we can't win the hand. When you're the aggressor pre-flop, it makes it much easier to navigate post-flop. So I make it $30 to go, and we end up getting 4 callers. So going 5 ways to the flop isn't ideal. Unless we hit a 6, then that would be very nice, but that's not what happens. Queen deuce deuce with 2 spades. The action checks over to the early position player, who decides to bet out very small for $35. I think if he actually had a value hand like a queen, he would try to bet bigger to protect from flush draws. So I think that this is him just trying to see a cheap turn card. I think pocket 6s are going to be ahead, even though there's 3 players to act behind us. I decide to stick in the call, and luckily all those players fold, so we're going to go heads up to a turn card, which is another deuce. We hit a full house. Obviously, we're still behind a queen, but when the early position bets out for $50, again, it's an extremely small bet. It's about a fifth the size of the pot. These bet sizes are telling me that the opponent is afraid and just wants to see a cheap river. I decide to keep him honest and stick in the call. The river now comes the king of diamonds. It's not the greatest card in the world because our opponent is going to have a good amount of king X of spades, but when he jams all in for $180, we have something to think about. The only hand that I would want to jam here is a king on the river or a deuce. If our opponent had a queen, this king would not be too appealing to them, and the average 1-2 player would most likely just check it over to me. I don't think this player is going to be jamming a queen for value here. Something about this entire hand was just played very weird, and I'm going off of a read, betting small again on the turn, and then jamming the river. I don't know, it's not making too much sense to me. So after a while of thinking, I decide to stick in the hero call here and listen to what he says.
That's a damn good job.
We find the call there on the river to win a $682 pot. We didn't get to see what our opponent has. I know he's technically supposed to show first, but when he says good call, I can't help but turn over my cards. So I'm glad we made the call there on the river and pieced together that story that just didn't make sense. Our stack is moving in the right direction. We look down at ace-queen offsuit on the button. There's a low jack player that makes a $15 and the cutoff puts in the call. Definitely going to be 3-betting here, trying to go heads up. I might get $50 to go. I like a sizing of $60 to $70 better. Especially here in Texas, you just want to go big because players tend to not fold their cards. It's really weird. Either way, both the players end up putting in the call. So our 3-bet is nothing but a pot juicer. We're going to go to a flop of 9-7-3 rainbow, an extremely dry board. So when the action checks to me, I think if we were heads up, I would check back here a lot. But since we're multi-way, I still think ace-queen is going to be ahead a lot of the time. So if we can narrow down the field and get heads up, it'll be a lot easier to navigate. That's what I do. I bet half pot for $75 and only the low jack player puts in the call. Heads up to a turn card here, which is the 7 of hearts. I like this card because it makes it less likely our opponent's going to have pocket sevens, which is definitely a hand that he could have here. Either way, when the low jack checks to me, I definitely don't want to bet here. We're only going to fold out worse hands and get called by better hands. Also, checking back allows our opponent to bluff on the river. So that's what I do. I check it back and the river is yet another 7. Again, a really good card. It's just less combos of hands like 8-7 suited, 6-7 suited, 9-7 suited. All hands that our opponent could reasonably have. But now our opponent decides to bet out for $140. A lot of you might be thinking snap fold, but I'm not sure what story he's trying to tell here. Obviously, our opponent can reasonably have 10s, 8s, a 9. That would definitely want to bet for value here. Sometimes he can even have jacks. But this player is pretty decent. I've been watching him since we started. And this runout is really good for me because it just makes it less likely he's going to have value combos. But after I 3-bet pre-flop, I'm not sure if our opponent will even want to value bet a 9 on this river. We can still have a lot of overpairs that'll check that turn card. I do think he's going to have a lot of floats like jack 10, maybe 10-8, as well as a couple suited broadways with backdoor flush draws. And for some reason, I just get the sense that our opponent is trying to bluff me, just like the last hand. I don't know. Maybe I'm a fish just calling down rivers. Something's in the air and it's telling me to put in the call, so that is what I do.
Calls, king high.
I don't think there's a better feeling in the world when you call with ace high and your opponent says king high. Unbelievable stuff. We catch our opponent trying to bluff us. That's not going to fly by me, buddy. Glad we can find the call with yet another story that didn't make sense. It's a really important part of poker to tell a believable story. You want to take similar lines when you have value and bluffs, so your opponents aren't going to be able to sniff you out so easily. Good thing nobody told that to the players in my table. Our stack is looking very nice. And we get a little deja vu here looking at ace-queen off on the cutoff. There's one limp and the hijack makes it a whopping $5 to go. That's really weird. I don't care. I'm going to 3-bet to $25 and only the hijack puts in the call. This is the same player that I called with pocket 6s earlier, so when the flop comes queen 6-5 and he checks it over to me, top is basically the nuts here. I'm going to bet out for $20 and the hijack player puts in the call fairly quickly, and we see the king of spades on the turn. I don't think this is a great card for us, not because I'm scared our opponent has a king, but it also is going to make it very difficult for us to get value from a hand like a 5, a 6, lower pocket pairs. Obviously, it's going to hit our range quite a bit, so when he checks it over to me, I don't love my bet of $45 here. I think I should be checking it back and going for more value on the river, and like I expected, the opponent folds. So unfortunately, we're going to take down this pot uncontested. Right into the next hand here, we have ace-10 offsuit on the hijack. Play to my right once again raises to $5. I'm not really sure. This player probably just doesn't like the $1 chips. Either way, I 3-bet to $20, and we end up getting 3 callers, the small blind, big blind, and the low jack player. So we're 4 ways to a flop. Luckily, we're in position on all players. The flop comes 10-8-8. We have top pair, top kicker, but when the action checks over to the low jack, I would expect him to check over to me since I was the pre-flop aggressor, but he doesn't like to play by the books. He bets out for $60. This is a 75% pot-sized bet. This is the same player that led into me when I was bluffing earlier, but he was betting a lot smaller. Either way, we have top pair, top kicker. We're definitely not going to be folding here. I stick in the call, and we're going to go heads up here to a turn, which is a good looking 4 of spades. It's a complete brick. When the low jack bets out for $100, again, I don't think I can be folding. He can still be value betting worse 10s. He could still have a number of draws like jack 9 and 9-7. So when he bets out for $100, he only has 100 left behind. But I don't see a point in jamming here. We're only targeting a very narrow range, which would be worse 10x. And I guess we want to give him the opportunity to bluff at the river. So I stick in the call, and the river is the 6 of clubs, another great card. It's a card under our 10, and we love to see that. Although 9-7 gets there, what are we going to do? He jams for $100, and we're getting 6-1 here. I put in the call and say an 8 is good, but he doesn't have an 8. He has queen 10. We're going to win this pot with our ace kicker. Pretty lucky that our opponent was value betting 3 streets with a 10 there. Feels like we're making all the right plays here. We're scooping in big pots. And even better when our buddy Joey sits directly to our right, and we're going to battle in these last 2 hands. The next hand, we look down at the dimes, pocket tens here. Joey raises it from under the gun +1 to $25, and I'm going to be 3-betting this against my buddy Joey. I make it $75 to go, and he puts in the call. The button straddle was on, and he gets ultimate last action, so he decides to jam blind for $43. And the flop comes, I would say, pretty decent for our pocket tens. Jack 6-6 rainbow. It's a pretty dry board, and tens are going to be ahead a large portion of the time, so when he checks over to me, I'm going to bet small, just a quarter size of the pot. I make it $55 to go, and Joey calls fairly quickly. Joey's definitely the kind of player to get sticky against me. We have a lot of history. We've been playing for a long time, and he knows I like to get wild, especially in these 3-bet and 4-bet pots. So I'm going to take advantage of that and bet for value here, especially when the turn comes to 4 spades and he checks it over to me. I don't think I need to go too big because he only has about 275 left in his stack. I think if we bet here and get call, we can definitely check back the river. So that's what I do. I decide on a small sizing of $85, and this puts Joey in the tank for a little while before he makes a decision, which is an all in for $275. Not the best move for us. Really puts us in the blender here, although I'm a little confused on what he'd be jamming this with. The only hands that would make sense would be King Jack and Ace Jack, but still those hands can't feel too comfortable because we have aces, kings, and queens while he does not. I guess he could have turned 4s full, and quad 6s is obviously very unlikely. I'm trying to piece together this story. This has just been a session of tanks on the river and making hero calls, and I think that this is going to be another hand where I do the exact same thing. I know that my buddy Joey likes to make moves on me, and I think he's making one here. Like I said, it's a very narrow range of value he's going to have here, and we're getting a nice price to put in the call, so that's what I end up doing. I stick in the call, and he says, I thought you had ace king, and shows us pocket deuces. That's his signature hand if you didn't know. The river comes the deuce of, I'm just kidding, it's the 3 of spades. We're going to scoop this pot. At least the side pot, because the button player now shows 7-5 for the rudder straight. He jammed blind for $43 and gets rewarded. Pretty silly there, but I'm not complaining. I'm going to scoop the bigger pot, and this session is going quite swimmingly. We get a couple black chips added to our stack. That's our first ever Poker House $100 chip. Looking beautiful there, and we're going to move on to our last hand of the night, once again against my buddy Joseph. We have 10-9 of clubs here on the cutoff. Joey makes it $20 from the hijack. I think mixing in 3-bet and call here is perfect. I decide on a call this time, and pretty surprised when we go heads up to a flop. The flop comes 9 high, which is great for us, and when he checks it over to me, I'm going to go for a bigger sizing here, looking for a lot of protection. I make it $30 to go, and Joey decides to put in $30 as well. Going to a turn card, which is pretty beautiful looking for us. It's the 7 of clubs. It improves us to a flush draw along with our top pair. Joey checks it over to me once again. I decide on a bet of $55. Looking back at this, I'm not too sure what I'm going to get called down by. Maybe ace high, maybe pocket 8s or pocket 6s. But regardless, I think when we pick up the flush draw, we should definitely bet. And if a scare card comes on the river, like an ace or a king, it'll hopefully give us a check back on the river. I bet out for $55, which is about half pot. And he takes a little while before making the call. But we are going to go heads up, and we are going to see a river, which is exactly what we're looking for. The jack of clubs. We river the 10 high flush. We're feeling amazing about our hand. We're wondering what kind of bet size we want to go with this river, but Joseph decides for us. He jams all in for $200. I snap call and show him my flush, and he looks disappointed and mucks his cards. We're going to scoop a pot a little over $600 to end the session. Joey would later tell us that he had ace king and he was turning it into a bluff. We end the night shortly after that, booking an amazing win of $1,435. Thank you guys for watching. Click that subscribe button, and we'll be back with another vlog very soon. Laters.